Love her or hate her, Applewhite is a character that has been sparking up arguments and debates for years. But one thing is for sure, Applewhite's character is complicated. So let's break down both sides of this argument and whether or not Applewhite can be considered a good or bad character. A vital part of Applewhite's character, and a large part of why people either love or hate her, is her motivations. Throughout the show, Applewhite makes it clear that she wants to follow her destiny of being the next Snow White. Her stance in following tradition is a highlight of what makes her character and what makes conflict in the story. But how she tries to attain her destiny and encourage her friends to live up to theirs is up for speculation and whether or not her actions are morally right. On one side, you could argue that her desire for her and her friends to follow their destiny is pure in intent at the beginning of the show. No one knows what will happen if they don't sign the Storybook of Legends, so at the beginning, it makes sense for why she is so upset with Raven when she doesn't sign. But after we find out that the Storybook of Legends doesn't curse anyone, or doesn't blow up the school if you don't sign, it doesn't make much sense for why Apple is so distraught at her friends for not following their stories. Her desire for her friends to fit their roles becomes questionable when she knows that Raven will have to suffer imprisonment, Briar will have to sleep for 1,000 years, and Ashlyn would be forced to be with somebody she didn't love. Apple is aware of all this and sees how much pain it brings her friends. I find it especially appalling that Apple calls Raven selfish in the first season after Raven didn't sign the book, when you could argue her intentions are just as selfish. Apple being so shocked at the idea that her friends don't want to follow their destiny after Raven confirms that the world won't blow up if she doesn't sign the book, shows that she doesn't think of how her friends' lives could seriously be affected by following their roles. A lot of fans really didn't like how Apple behaved towards her friends when they started to show rebel tendencies, but I think it is important to note that Apple's story is also shown to be pretty scary. I think in a way, Apple has been conditioned by the adults around her that following her destiny is the right thing to do. But I don't think Apple herself 100% wants in her heart for her story to happen. In Dragon Games, the Evil Queen gives Apple the opportunity for her to start her story by poisoning her on the spot, and she refuses. Dragon Games really shows off the worst of Apple and what she is willing to do to get her destiny, but at the end of the day, she didn't take the opportunity. Apple swings back and forth in what she wants from Raven, in a way that's frustrating to many viewers. She wants her to be her friend, but also wants her to be evil and poison her.
Can you believe it? Raven isn't going to try to poison me. I need an herbal potion soak.
She even acknowledges the fact that Raven is a good person in the last episode of season 3 where she says,
I know I always wanted you to become your mom, but now, I just don't think it's in you. Your heart is just too good.
But following this in the next season, Apple manipulates and hurts her friends in order to try to achieve her happily ever after. Apple makes a deal with the Evil Queen in trying to make Raven evil and to ensure her own destiny.
I will do whatever it takes, and I am like my mother, and my destiny is mine!
While it is important to note that Apple does feel bad for a lot of her actions throughout the season, and the Evil Queen does threaten to ruin her reputation, ultimately, her decision to lie and manipulate her friends is hers to make. A ruined reputation for Apple does seem to be a big fear for her.
Apple's popularity is down
because of the pressure to be perfect put by her mother. But I'd still argue that allowing your friends,
just like your mother,
and dragons, to be hurt in order to protect yourself is questionable. My least favorite scene from Apple in this season is when she comes in and accuses Raven of setting the fire during the Dragon Games on purpose, when she knows that it was the Evil Queen's doing. This line sticks out to me because she directly lies and tries to manipulate Raven when she knows what actually went down. There's no Evil Queen in sight, forcing her to lie or manipulate Raven here, so it makes me wonder why she even brings this up. At the beginning of the series, Apple accepts the fact that Darling Charming is her predetermined prince with no hesitation. They aren't dating, but they make it clear that they are devoted to one another. It doesn't even seem like Apple likes daring much in a romantic fashion, but she knows in order to achieve her happily ever after, she's going to have to marry him, which has been enforced to her by the faculty around her and by the adults around her, including her mother. So she accepts it and doesn't seem upset about it at all. But then later on in the Dragon Game season, we find out that Prince Daring isn't the predetermined prince for Apple. When Apple gets poisoned by the evil queen in Dragon Games, Prince Daring tries to wake Apple up with a kiss, but completely flops, and nothing happens. Then later on, Darling Charming does CPR on Apple. And then Apple wakes up, which confirms that Darling Charming is Apple's predetermined partner. Most people who watched this were so excited for the representation in the show. But there were a couple fans that felt that Apple and Darling's kiss scene strange. Now let me make this clear, we love representation. However, a lot of fans felt like this was forced. Darling and Apple never interacted much before this scene, and even though it's allegedly not supposed to be taken in a romantic sense, the writers wrote what they wrote at the end of the day. I think this scene is really pivotal to Apple's character. Apple is a character that is centered on traditional roles and values, and in Ever After High, I'm assuming there's no romantic gay couples, so I'm actually kind of surprised that Apple didn't freak out about this, especially after how she reacted when her friend Ashlyn tried dating a rebel and she thought that it was the end of the world. But I am so happy for Apple, and I think this shows such a development of character. I wouldn't define Apple as an evil character, but I would say she is heavily flawed, which is good. Characters shouldn't just be one-dimensional. Truly though, I think that Apple is heavily misguided and she blindly and naively follows adult figures too fast.
Your mom has promised to restore order, and she's so powerful, I know she can.
She idolizes her mom and even follows the evil queen at one point, and follows what they say even when she knows it's wrong.
And use your resources to get your fairy tale back on track.
Whoa.
But I think it's harder for a lot of people to sympathize with her character when she receives so much privilege compared to other characters. She's beautiful, she's popular, and she doesn't receive any sort of backlash or bullying for her upbringing because of her family.
She is evil!
Run, everyone!
Not to mention, her story has a happily ever after, unlike some of the other characters in the series. But ultimately, I think it's truly hard to define whether Applewhite's character is really bad or really good because, one, it's up to the viewer. Some people will get really mad at her for the scenes where she is being selfish, even when she does apologize later. And second of all, the story never was finished. So we never got to see the full and final form of Apple's character. I would guesstimate, with how the show represented Apple, that Apple would have become a rebel eventually. I would guess that there would have been a season where they come back to Apple's family and Apple's mom, and from there, Apple would have settled it in a huge argument saying, "Well, I'm gonna follow my own destiny," or something like that. But these are just guesses because we're never going to know how the story was going to end. Ultimately, whether she's a good or bad character is so hard to decide because the show never finished and we never got to see her in this final form, meaning we can only look back at the bad times of her and how her unfinished character ended up being. It is so frustrating, but is the ultimate reality for us Ever After High fans in the year 2024. But let me know what y'all think. Do you think she should have ended up being a rebel or a royal? Where did y'all see from where they left off her being? Honestly, it could go either way, but I only lead towards rebel because of the mom thing. But I would love to hear your theories. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a good one. Bye!